Sea otters have been absent from the Oregon coast for more than 100 years after they were hunted to local extinction. But two visitors have recently brought hope for their return. Cale Williams with our Environment Northwest team shows us the efforts to bring sea otters back.
This beach looks so sculptural.
I see a lot of...
Chanel Hayson gets a lot of reports about sea otters on the Oregon coast.
Wouldn't that be magical if I was like, there he is?
Are there any out there?
It's very, very rare that it's actually a sea otter. I don't see them.
Hayson is the outreach director at the ROKU Alliance,
Usually they hang around the rocks.
a group working to bring sea otters back to Oregon. When she heard reports of sea otters at Ecola State Park,
Yeah.
she responded like she always does.
If you can get me a photo or video evidence, I can determine if it's a river otter, which 99% of the time it is.
Her source hustled to grab some pictures, and
As soon as she sent that email over with a scope photo of a cute little furry face, I was like, that is a sea otter.
the next day, Hayson made a beeline for the coast, hiked out to the beach, and saw something remarkable.
Lo and behold, there was actually two out there, which was mind-blowing because that was the first time that I've known of seeing two live sea otters out on the Oregon coast together. And I was like, there he is!
Hayson's mind was blown because sea otters have been functionally extinct in Oregon for more than a century.
The last Oregon sea otter that we've been able to find a record of in our research was killed 12 years before my grandfather was born.
That's Peter Hatch, a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and secretary of the ROKU Alliance. From time immemorial, sea otters have held tremendous cultural importance to tribes all along the Oregon coast.
In our stories and traditions, they're seen as a relative, and part of a web of interrelationships that are laid out in those stories.
Sea otters were hunted sustainably by tribes, mostly for their fur.
They're valued because it is the softest, richest, most beautiful fur that exists in nature.
But that changed when settlers moved into the area.
From the 1700s on, all along this coast, all the way up to Alaska for the commercial fur trade, which really exhausted their numbers, not just here, but on much of the West Coast.
Sea otters have been successfully reintroduced in Alaska and Washington. A small population avoided extinction in central California. But in Oregon, the coast has been without this keystone species since the early 1900s. But bringing back sea otters isn't just a vanity project. It's not just because they're cute, though they are, or because they're culturally important to indigenous people. The absence of sea otters has left an imbalance on Oregon's coast.
They have a disproportionately large effect on the ecosystem based to their abundance, or relative to their abundance.
And that's become more apparent than ever over the last decade. Starting in 2014, a wasting disease began wreaking havoc with sea stars all along the West Coast.
It's about 99% of the whole population was decimated, and they haven't made a comeback.
Sea stars are prolific predators of purple sea urchins. So when sea stars disappeared, the urchin population exploded.
Without these top predators, sea urchins are overpopulating and overgrazing on kelp, which is basically the foundation for our underwater forests and home to thousands of species.
That's left areas of the coast, previously teeming with kelp forests, barren, covered only by a carpet of purple sea urchins. And it's hard to overstate the importance of kelp forests to coastal ecosystems.
So they're home to thousands of species of fish, invertebrates, marine mammals, from little harbor seals to big, enormous gray whales.
Sea otters, if they were here, would have helped keep the urchin population in check.
Part of our hope behind a reintroduction would be putting in place another backstop that really should always have been there.
Correct.
Now, Hayson said there has been some hesitation from folks in the fishing and crabbing industries, but
we are working closely to have one-on-one conversations with these individuals and figure out what's the best way to, if there's any negative implications, how to work that through.
So when might we actually have sea otters back in the water in Oregon? There are still several studies to complete and issues to iron out. But earlier this year, tribal leaders from the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians asked the Secretary of the Interior to prioritize the effort. They called upon the federal government to bring sea otters back within the next 5 years. And for Hasten, the 2 sea otters spotted here last month were an inspiring glimpse of what could be.
It was a magical, historical moment, and especially for me as someone who's working very hard to restore our population. It was like a little glimmer of hope of exactly what we could see in the future here off of our coast.
Cale Williams, Environment Northwest.
And if you want more of our Environment Northwest content, just head on over to KREM 2 Plus. It's free to download on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.